In the summer of 2024, most political analysts doubted Trump would be allowed to win the presidential election, primarily because the deep state opposed him. They considered him an outsider, unpredictable, and therefore uncontrollable, a threat to those who dictate American politics. Even if he were to win, they said, as they had before, the two crocodiles from Wall Street and Capitol Hill would hold him tightly by the hands and feet, preventing him from acting independently. This was depicted in a cartoon published in 2016. Another cartoon, published on November 7, 2024, immediately after the election, shows Trump standing in front of the Capitol building, declaring, "And the government will be my loyalty machine." He then adds, "Isn't it beautiful?" A natural question arises. Who gave Trump carte blanche this time to build his own team, not just within the presidential administration, but also across ministries and powerful agencies like the Attorney General's office, the Department of Justice, the FBI, the CIA, and many others, a long list indeed. A team that is genuinely his own, not the compromised team he had in 2017. Who allowed him to bring in a team of cleaners and swamp drainers in Washington? Ramaswamy and Musk reportedly bombarded Uncle Sam with so-called pink slips, dismissal notices for civil servants from the old liberal administration. During his first term, Trump was hopelessly mired in the swamp. But today, few doubt he will drain it. What happened during these 8 years of American political life to bring about such a radical transformation? Let's start with a quote from Bloomberg on December 5, 2024. Elon Musk works Congress as he eyes $2 trillion budget chop. World's richest man embarks on effort to slash U.S. spending. Joined by former Republican presidential candidate Ramaswamy. Musk's target to cut $2 trillion exceeds the amount Congress spends annually on government agency operations, including defense. It would likely require significant cuts to popular entitlement programs such as Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, and veterans benefits. But reducing the U.S. federal budget by $2 trillion would mean reducing the GDP by the same amount. Why? Because this $2 trillion doesn't come from taxes or the economy, which could reinvest the money, but from the printing press. Nearly $2 trillion represents today's federal budget deficit. If it's removed from the budget, it will disappear from the GDP too. Could it be that Trump and Musk plan to crash the U.S. economy with Congress's approval? The answer is no. No one would allow them to sabotage the economy at the cost of a 10% GDP reduction. So what are they planning? And why hasn't anyone stopped them yet? The answer lies in an AP News article from July 28, 2024, before Trump's election victory. Former President Donald Trump on Saturday laid out his plans to wholeheartedly embrace cryptocurrency if elected for a second term, telling hundreds of cheering supporters of digital tokens that he wants the U.S. to become a Bitcoin superpower under his leadership. In his keynote address at a Bitcoin conference in Nashville, Tennessee, the Republican presidential nominee promised to make the United States the crypto capital of the planet and establish a Bitcoin strategic reserve using the government's current holdings. Here, Trump seemingly stepped onto territory where they shoot without warning, and not in the ear, but straight in the temple. This is roughly the same thing Kennedy did in 1963, when on July 4, he signed Executive Order number 11,110, which allowed the Treasury Department to issue U.S. banknotes directly, backed by silver, without involving the Federal Reserve. And on November 22 of that same year, Kennedy was gone. Could it be that Trump, too, has grown tired of living and decided to do something similar? The answer is no. Then what does all this mean? In my book, The Arc of the President, published in January 2024, I explored the issues surrounding the dollar system in great detail. The book is a blend of political thriller, spy novel, and historical investigation. I focused on how the dollar system was successfully reformed twice, both times by Republicans. First, Richard Nixon decoupled the dollar from the gold standard, a risky move, but one his team executed brilliantly. Later, Ronald Reagan introduced what became known as Reaganomics, a system now living out its final years. foreseeing that the overdue third dollar reform would again be carried out by Republicans. I made them the main characters of the arc of the present. This is because Republicans are currently the most pragmatic part of the American political elite, unlike the overly ideological Democrats. The Russian president learns of their intention to carry out a new dollar reform from his personal agent in the United States. He then orders the development of an alternative version of dollar reform, one that benefits not only the US, but also Russia. And here, Russian interference was not absent either. Let's return to Trump. His first 4 years in office were seen as a mistake by the American electoral system. The groundwork for a new dollar system reform had not yet been prepared by liberals in alliance with neocons. This is why, in 2020, Trump was not allowed back into the White House. His return would have interfered with another team, the Democrats, who were focused on implementing a new Morgenthau plan. This plan aimed to relocate key segments of European industry, primarily from Germany, to the United States. Let me remind you that under the Marshall Plan, the United States aimed to expand the dollar's role in international trade. As a result, by 1960, Germany had been elevated to third place in global GDP. This achievement came in a reduced form, as it excluded East Germany, and followed only the United States and the Soviet Union. Today, however, U.S. monetary authorities no longer wish to spend their dollars on Germany. Instead, they are focused on investing those resources into the domestic economy. Therefore, Germany is being destabilized and deindustrialized with the help of Ukraine, without which there would be no pretext for disconnecting Europe's largest economy and former top global exporter from cheap Russian hydrocarbons. As the saying goes, "The Lord giveth, and the Lord taketh away." Did Trump attempt to reform the dollar system during his first term? No, that wasn't his territory. Now let's hear from Trump himself about what he says regarding the dollar system as of December 1, 2024. The idea that the BRICS countries are trying to move away from the dollar while we stand by and watch is over. We require a commitment from these countries that they will neither create a new BRICS currency nor back any other currency to replace the mighty US dollar, or they will face 100% tariffs and should expect to say goodbye to selling into the wonderful US economy. They can go find another sucker. There is no chance that the BRICS will replace the US dollar in international trade, and any country that tries should wave goodbye to America. On one hand, Trump's statements emphasize his loyalty to the dollar. On the other hand, he pushes for an alternative in the form of cryptocurrencies. By all indications, these may soon be recognized by the new Trump administration as a tool for state accumulation. Doesn't this approach undermine the foundations of the dollar system? Larry Summers, Treasury Secretary under Clinton, calls this madness. However, Federal Reserve Chair Jerome Powell, speaking from the height of his responsible position, stated that Bitcoin poses no threat to the dollar, as it is a competitor not to the dollar but to gold. Fine. Trump has full consensus with the Federal Reserve leadership regarding Bitcoin, and generally good relations with its chair dating back to his first term. But where and how does this represent a reform of the dollar system? The fact is, from the moment the dollar became a global currency after World War II, its primary backing was not gold, but international trade, which was conducted primarily in dollars. The dollar's link to gold was needed for the Bretton Woods Agreement, but it immediately became a burden for it. Some European leaders, starting in the late 1950s, began actively exchanging paper dollars for American gold. De Gaulle, in particular, stood out, significantly accelerating the process of decoupling the dollar from gold. Immediately after Nixon's reform, gold and the dollar became commodities traded on the exchange, after which gold prices soared. However, even after this, the dollar did not lose its value as a universal means of international settlements, a role it largely retains to this day. Serious problems for the dollar arose only when global trade became fully saturated with dollars, and dollar emissions beyond global GDP growth began translating into inflation. To prevent the excess printed dollars from entering the consumer market, during Ronald Reagan's presidency, financial authorities began gradually and then increasingly aggressively inflating stock market bubbles, as seen in this chart, to hide inflation. These very same excess printed dollars were used to stimulate the national and global economy. as well as to cover the U.S. federal budget deficit. Another bubble where U.S. monetary authorities hid inflation for decades was the real estate market. Over the past 10 years, property prices have doubled. The current plan of U.S. monetary authorities is to gradually deflate or at least stop inflating these old bubbles in the securities markets. The goal is to revitalize American industry and reduce real estate prices, which currently account for up to 35% of household expenditures on average. Instead of the traditional old bubbles where dollar inflation used to be stored, there will now be cryptocurrencies. The entire world will mine them using their own gas, oil, and coal. No one cares about the carbon footprint anymore. And the U.S. will become the cryptocurrency capital and regulator, acting like a vacuum cleaner to absorb excess inflationary dollars from crypto investors worldwide. Isn't this brilliant? At the same time, crypto bubbles will have no impact on real estate prices, which have become unaffordable for many. Because once every bank offers crypto accounts, currently a niche service with no state protection, real estate, losing its investment component, will revert to being just property, as it was in the mid-20th century. And this is undoubtedly a good thing. Its value will normalize again. But will Trump and his team succeed in making America great again after successfully implementing the dollar system reform, assuming it succeeds? I'm not so sure. America's greatness by the end of World War II was not created by the dollar, which until 1944 was merely a regional currency, and in foreign trade was overshadowed by the British pound. The foundation of the U.S.'s success in the first half of the 20th century was industrial production, not the financial and service sectors that dominate today. Mid-20th century America was the China of the 21st century. Can America regain the industrial and civilizational leadership it held throughout the 20th century? The answer is no, because the primary condition for the dollar system's existence is its backing by global trade, a significant share of which depends on China, the #1 exporter of goods with high added value. Any attempt to isolate China from the dollar, including imposing protective tariffs on its goods, is merely political rhetoric from American leaders. Isolation of China from the dollar would lead to the collapse of the dollar system itself, which allows U.S. capital to flow across borders while simultaneously being dependent on other countries. Understanding all these problems, the protagonists of my book, Republican congressmen, proposed a dollar system reform project to the Federal Reserve leadership that would be completely free of inflationary bubbles, including cryptocurrency ones. Most likely, as it seems to me now, crypto bubbles will be a temporary and transitional measure by U.S. monetary authorities on the way to a more radical dollar reform. After all, any inflationary bubbles distract investors from investing in a normal productive economy, and, as a result, turn a healthy economy into a cripple. Parallel to the storyline about dollar system reform, which begins and ends the book, a mysterious murder takes place in Rome. The victim is a friend of an American congressman who managed to utter only one word before his death. David Mancini, the name of this American congressman, hires a private detective who finds this word in a Roman basilica. It is engraved on marble alongside other words that undermine the entire official history of ancient Rome and fully confirm my theory that the era of ancient Rome and the Roman Empire is actually the period from the 15th to the mid-17th century, the very Renaissance. I am confident that almost no one, or very few, among our Russian historians knows about this artifact, and few in the West do either. I haven't mentioned it in my films or my first book yet. This artifact is the best reward for me as a researcher. It is my holy grail, not mythical like Dan Brown's, but very real and existing in reality. This artifact has been described in rare art books starting from the 17th century, the era just before it was created. These two storylines converge at a single point and a single word spoken by the murdered friend of the American congressman. That's all from me for now. Thank you for your subscriptions, likes, comments, and shares on social media. All the best, and see you next time. This was Alexander Tamansky.